shit. Fuck you. You're an asshole.
Can't believe 30 years that fucking thing hasn't worn out yet. It's Allah's will. It's Allah's will. And speaking of Allah, who will read from the Quran this morning? Any volunteers? Some of the kids had questions overnight from YouTube. Yes, Josh is 18 years old a few months ago. See, they don't want to believe. That says it all, really. They think it's a scam. He's 71 years old or 38 with a Harvard MBA, went to Princeton, and yet, because they can't believe it. That's fucking remarkable. I mean, it's beyond my comprehension. And I got the brain as big as a fucking planet. They think that I would make up a story about a kid. That's where you're coming from. It's a sad motherfucking commentary, though. Second thing is, they ask me how many languages I speak. None of your fucking business. Next, I was crying this morning listening to myself. I mean, it's fucking, I am so fucking good. It's beyond my brain, some of the shit I say. But the last 2 days, we started this morning, and like in sex, it all comes at the end. And the building block process, we're already about halfway through the 7 steps, but the real steps that you're implementing out there, not the change of your persona steps that we've gone through for the last 4 days, starts after lunch. And Matt is going to tell you his story of how he's made the program work in person because he's here, and then it'll be on the webinar, and how he's working on 4 or 5 deals. Last night's experiment apparently went all right. We've never done that before for an evening meal, and but it's noticeable to Sally and I that sitting like truck drivers, no pun intended to the truck driver here, in a mess hall is more in your comfort zone. That says a fucking bunch too. That says volumes. You're all there like swap and spit.
Food in boxes too.
Yep. Yep. I was just going to get around to that because we had fish and chips last night from a fish chippy or a van that comes. I never seen one of those or eaten from one of those. And but that's very meaningful. I mean, you were never so vocal. You were there, and you know, it's like a fraternity house. I don't think about it too much, but that's why you are the way you are. And even those, for the very few of you that came from some type of real breeding, and there's only a couple of you, and that's questionable whether because really none of you have come from any breeding. But I mean, giving a couple of you the benefit of the doubt, it was interesting for Sally and I to sit down at the end of the table and watch you all. It's like you all knew each other 10 years. You had started in school and kindergarten, and you were now seniors in high school or first, second year university, and it was remarkable to watch. But you went back to default. You want to know what fucking default is, kids? You were sitting in it last night. That's not why we did the exercise. We had no idea. So now I've got to decide whether it's worth, that default is worth it. But you were all back in default. And for those of you that were in a fraternity, I'm sure, or ever sat in a mess hall, that's it. If you haven't sat in a mess hall and you were never in a fraternity, you have now experienced it. But it's just not that I need any validation that you are a product of your social and economic milieu or your social environment and the 5 people that you spent most of the time with. That was a fucking stamp to show where your comfort zone is. And so the reason I bring it up this morning is you can see now why you have to be very careful that you don't go back into default when you go back. It was just like, oh God, it was like seals swimming together and, you know, on the rocks and crawling up and rolling over, and the seals let the sun on their belly, and it was a thing. It was interesting to watch. Any questions? We didn't have any movies last night. Any questions on anything that we've covered heretofore? On anything from the first day, or any of the homework that we've had in the past? The kids on YouTube, and I appreciate the accolades and stuff like that. Yeah, but I know I'm on the top of my game, kids. Thanks very much, but I already know that. But it's nice, you know. It's nice for them to. I'm more interested in them watching it and getting something from the experience. Not that I'm a great, eloquent speaker. But if I wasn't such a good speaker, how much would my message get out? Because some of the guys that are out there, and some of you have attended their stuff, can't speak very well. And their message is really so you can go to the back of the room and buy something from them. That's when their message gets the best, when they're trying to get you to take your credit card out and go to the back of the room and buy something. I was amazed to find out, because I've asked over the last year or two, that methodology of selling at seminars at the back of the room has been around 40, 50 years. And I would have thought with the new 21st century and how smart you kids are supposed to be, and realize it's just a sales ploy, that they still do it. And more importantly, or more funny to me, is it's effective still. Because you take your fucking credit cards out and you go to the back room and buy shit. You're still buying. It's remarkable. In that case, I take my hat off all of the guys that still do that. You know, and I guess they operate under the proposition: if it still works, don't fix it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, because it still works. And that Pavlov's dog response is that when they get you lathered up, heated up in the sales process, that rather than wait for you to go home and click on and buy something, they still do it. A couple of the guys out there, you can actually buy while you're sitting watching the seminar. You can buy online, as opposed to go back there and click your credit card. Yes, sir.
The Amazon document you gave us, I read through that and I had a question about it.
Okay.
There's a big cultural difference between that and Facebook, Google, etc. They reference that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd be curious to understand I want to hear from you what you think is the major difference between the Amazon culture versus like a Facebook or a Google culture.
Just to bring the YouTubers up to speed, I gave an article. I sent a link out before you even got to the seminar about Amazon, and an article that was written sometime last year by a reputable newspaper. I don't know if it was the New York Times. It was somebody. And it was a long, in-depth article, and it was about the culture, Bibos, the founder, and how he operates. And the first 2/3 of the article was pretty positive. The last third of the article was basically saying that he treated them like animals, more or less. And it contrasted, as you're pointing out, Google, Facebook culture, which is not like the Amazon culture. And but the throwaway, and it's not a throwaway comment, for a bit of information, that Amazon has grown significantly more in market capitalization, market value, than Google and Facebook has. And I believe it's either the biggest or second biggest company in the world vis-a-vis market cap. And it's in the hundreds of billions. And it's also made Bibos and a number of their shareholders extremely wealthy. The difference is really comes down to, I think, Bibos' background, where he came from, how he got started, and what his vision was And this really translates to when you're recruiting your chairman and your board members, what your vision is, what the vision is you're going to sell them on. And the more sincere your vision is, the easier the sale will be. Whereas Bebo said from the get-go, we are not going to pay dividends. We are not going to. He set it up. He never told anybody bullshit. He said we're not trying to be a General Motors. We're not trying to be this. We only want 100% fully dedicated people that believe in my dream. And of course, the Amazon model has morphed and added a lot of different things now from when he started, I guess 10, 15 years ago, whenever he started. And, they're delivering by drones and they want to do all these things. Whereas going back to before Facebook and Google, the Microsoft, which was one of the first companies like that was led by a visionary, in the last 30 years anyway. But if you have to really go back before that. You have to go back to Henry Ford and the guys that were the visionaries of 100 years ago. And virtually all the guys that were the visionaries from those years, Tom Watson of IBM, Tom Watson Sr., they were all hard-driven men that many of them were born in the previous century, in the late 1800s. And Bebos, is, in my judgment, is a throwback to one of those guys. He doesn't give a fuck what anybody thinks. He's candid. He says what's on his mind. Whereas the Google guys, as smart as they are more politically correct and more save the world. And I'm not saying that Bebos isn't a save the world guy. I don't know. But it's clear that the Google and Facebook guys are save the world. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with saving the world, but I tell you, go out, make a lot of money, then save the world. Not try to save the world when you got nothing and you're walking around an embassy with a placard saying global warming. That doesn't accomplish much, in my judgment. And since I'm 70 years old and I've seen this for 50, 60 years, I haven't seen any really good come from that. So the real difference between the Amazon and the Facebook, the Amazon and the Google model, is that he's an authoritarian. He's a strict authoritarian, and he's a young guy. He's not, somebody from my generation. Okay, why is he authoritarian? Well, he's the product of his social and economic milieu. He's the product of the 5 people, and apparently his grandparents' parents were tougher on him than the Google founders were on them, or the Facebook guys. Which is basically Zuckerberg. So he comes out of a different stable. And he comes out of a different background. And all the guys from Facebook, not all, the founders, Facebook, Google, and Amazon are well educated. A couple didn't finish university, but well educated. They came from reasonably good families. They had ethnic diversification, which is normally a good thing. So you get the ideas from, Eastern Europe, wherever they came from. But the biggest difference is that his vision is so strong, and it's personal vision. He doesn't want any regrets, and he's got the 80-year regret thing, just like I do, much stronger than the other guys. So he's much more, less interested in what you think, Chris, as a manager. And it's pretty obvious. Whereas you've been taught just the opposite. You've been taught that you should be interested what your employees think. But in this day and age, to have a guy say you got to work 80 hours before you are considered, to keep your job. I personally like that, but it's not politically correct. Okay, YouTube.